Hello, America. Welcome to the show. This is coffee time again where the conversations begin. Today we're beginning the conversation with Doug Cardell, and he's got a book out. We're going to be talking about it and a lot of other subjects. I've got some questions here that he's always willing to answer. So I'm going to be asking some of those questions and some of my own. By the way, I don't do gotcha questions either. I don't like them. So anyway, welcome to the show. And let us begin, and I will introduce Doug Cardell to you and let him tell him about himself. I'm having a rough day. So go ahead, Doug.
I'm happy to be here, Dale. I'm an economist. I've got a PhD in economics, and I've got a new book out, Why Socialism Struggles, Exposing the Economic Errors that Undermine Utopian Ideals. And so far, it's got a 5-star rating on Goodreads, and it's available for pre-order on Amazon. I wrote this book because I'm really very worried. There are a lot of people in the country right now that seem to be looking at socialism as a viable alternative to our economic system, and it's scary. The mayoral elections recently in New York and Seattle, we have 2 socialists elected to run fairly large, in the case of New York, the largest cities in the country. And there are so many problems with that it's honestly hard to know where to begin. I guess the first place to begin is basically in the beginning. Karl Marx was incredibly naive. He really didn't know much at all about economics, and his partner Engels didn't really know much more. They didn't understand a whole lot of stuff. Marx grew up in the early 1800s in small towns where everything was all the shops and so on were like mom and pop shops. And he thought that was just wonderful. And, a lot of us think about the world we grew up in as being the ideal world. And Marx was no exception. Then he moved to the big cities and he found out that all these big companies and big factories, and he thought that was just terrible, that it was ruining the world. So he and Engels set out to design a system that would prevent that from happening. Essentially, what he did was design a system that would eliminate progress. That was what he was really trying to do.
Yes.
And he succeeded. He indeed designed a system that would prevent progress. And right now, there are very, very few truly socialist countries in the world. North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela. That's probably about it. Some of the others are close, but those are the only ones that are absolutely socialist. Do the people that are talking about socialism as an alternative really want the United States to become a country like North Korea? And I don't think they do. I think the problem is they don't really understand what socialism is. They think that there's this thing that they call democratic socialism. Democratic socialism is an oxymoron. Socialism cannot be democratic.
You know where it came from, that term? Democratic socialism. You know where that term came from?
Sure, I do actually. The countries in Europe call themselves social democracies.
Yeah. What happened is in 1912, 1913, Vladimir Lenin, remember him? Well, you may not remember him, but you know who he is. You're not my age yet. And he was, of course, forming the Soviet Union, and he says, we're going to call this a democratic socialism because that will fool the people, and they'll vote for it. And he was right.
Yeah, and socialism is a state in which the government owns all means of production and all property.
Right.
Now, if you cannot make economic decisions for yourself, how is it a democracy? If you can't make economic decisions, you can't make any decisions. Because I would suggest that pretty much every decision anyone makes is basically an economic decision.
Mm-hmm.
Economics is the study of how we allocate resources. And every time we do anything, we're trading one thing for another. Right now, you and I are giving up our time, and your listeners are giving up their time to do this podcast. So we're trading our time for creating value here. Every decision is that. You're always trading one thing for another because you could always do something different with your time, your money, your energy. And in socialism, you're not allowed to make economic decisions. Therefore, you're basically not allowed to make any decisions.
Right.
So calling something democratic socialism is just a misnomer. And in fact, if you even look at the website of the Democratic Socialists of America, they actually say that they are looking for this to be a route to full socialism. So there's nothing democratic about any of it. So yeah, Marx invented a system that would stop all progress. Now I occasionally hear people say stuff. Well, isn't it too bad that Home Depot is putting the mom and pop stores out of business? Here's the problem. In an economy like ours that's growing, too much of the things that we want are things that can't be done at a mom and pop level. We're talking right now across an internet on fancy computers. Mom and pop can't sit in their basement and build internets and computers for us.
No.
I mean, we might idealize that and say, gee, wouldn't it be nice if they could? But it can't happen.
No.
And that's a lot of the problem with socialism. One way to think of it is John, I'm a big Beatles fan. And John Lennon wrote a song in which he advertised socialism. Imagine that a world without religion, a world without borders, a world without property, a world without possessions. John Lennon's a great musician, great writer, but he's not an economist.
No.
But the title of his song says it all. Imagine. He's talking about an imaginary world that can never be realized. What would it mean to have no possessions? Does that mean you and I got to share a toothbrush? I mean, what does it mean to have no possessions? And it's just a silly notion. And that's too often the problem with socialism is that, in fact, that is the problem. Is that they're looking for things that can't happen. Now, even though, let's just assume for the moment that that's not a problem. What would happen if we did socialism? Could we make it work? And the answer is no. It's impossible. And that's a large part of my research. As part of it, I did a 30-year study on the real personal consumption expenditures, which is probably the best economic predictor. Mm-hmm. I studied what the Federal Reserve predicted every year for the next year, and then I compared that with what actually ended up happening. The Federal Reserve was right 46% of the time. You would literally have done better flipping a coin. They were off by as much as 34%. That's not a small error. No. Now, let me make clear that I'm not saying the Federal Reserve is incompetent. Quite the contrary. I couldn't do any better. That's the point. No one could. The reason why is that the economy is a chaotic system. The first chaotic system discovered was the weather by a guy named Lorenz in 1972. What he found out was that he was building weather models, trying to predict the weather, And he found out that very tiny changes in the inputs to his model would make huge changes in the output of his model. You may have heard his famous line, "Can a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil precipitate a tornado in Texas?" And the answer is yes, because there are many times in a chaotic system where you touch it, where you reach a tipping point where even one molecule moving makes a difference. And what he found when he did that was that the weather couldn't be predicted any more than about 2 weeks out. And even then, it was flaky. I would challenge your listeners, get your favorite weather app out, look where it says your weather is going to be a week from now. Write it down, wait a week, and see what happens. Do that for a week or two and see what their batting average is. And you're going to find out it's not very good. The economy is just as bad. I would paraphrase Lorenz and say, is it possible that a consumer buying a pair of shoes in Peru precipitates a depression in Poland? And yes, the answer is it could. Because the economy, just as the weather has thousands and thousands of air molecules moving around, any which of which can cause an effect, we have billions of consumers buying, selling, planning, and all of those things change the economy. So the problem was, in socialism, what the socialist governments try to do is they get somebody like me, they hire an economist and say, all right, Dr. Doug, you plan the economy. You tell us how many cell phones to buy next week, how many cars to build next year, how many this, how many that. I can't do that. Why not? There just isn't enough information available, and there can never be. Because in order for me to do that, not only do I have to look at what's actually happening in the economy, I have to read the mind of every consumer and say, what are they planning to buy a year from now? Good luck with that.
Amen to that one.
Yeah, it's impossible. I can't do that. So what has to happen in socialism is the government has to dictate everything so the consumer has no choice. Because if the consumers had choice, they would goof up the planning. But even then, the planning tends not to work. None of Russia's 5-year plans, when they were doing them, ever materialized correctly because it's impossible. You can't plan what you can't predict, and the economy is unpredictable. So socialism, even if you thought it was a good idea, could never, ever work. It's just impossible.
I tend to agree with you on socialism, and Vladimir Lenin had another real good statement about socialism that I really agree with. The goal of socialism is communism.
Mm-hmm.
Again, in 1913 is when he said that. Or 1922, he said that in 1922 when he signed the Constitution of the USSR.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was his goal, but communism will never happen.
No.
As Marx just defined it, communism is when socialism becomes so successful that the government fades away.
Yeah.
And right, I can imagine that everybody that is in power in governments is going to give that up.
Oh, yeah, you bet they will, especially in socialist countries when they have people like Maduro over there in Venezuela. He's going to give up his power. I don't have any power, and I wouldn't give it up if I had it. What's the source of the value of things?
Oh, good question. This is something that's really misunderstood about economics. People think that things or labor or anything else have inherent value. So we tend to think of something like gold having inherent value. Nothing has inherent value. Value comes from within us, within all of us combined. So it worked kind of like this. Each of us inside has a list, or maybe it's more like a web, of our own values. Here's what I value most. Here's what I value second most, third most, fourth most, fifth most, and so on. And that's constantly changing, even within any one individual. So what we do when we deal with value is something like this. Let's say you and I go to dinner, and you really like bread and I really like salad. And so when our meal comes, we decide to trade. I take your salad and you take my bread. Okay, great. Now, does it matter to us what the menu price of those two items was? In other words, if the bread was valued more than the salad, did you get a bad deal? No, of course not, because we both got what we wanted. That's the way free trade works, and that's the way value works. And so the value of anything is based on the total input of all consumers. And so now that can change based on things like supply and demand. I saw an article not long ago that said that if we could capture the asteroid Psyche and break it up and have it sort of rain down its stuff on Earth, everybody on Earth would be a billionaire. Well, that's complete nonsense. A lot of Psyche is indeed gold, according to what I've read. And let's just pretend that Psyche could rain down billions of marble-sized pieces of gold all over the world. Now, what would happen? Well, gold's value would drop dramatically. In fact, it would probably end up with negative value.
Yes.
What? Negative value?
Yes.
Sure, because you know what people would do? They would pay people to clean their backyards and haul it away.
Yeah.
Because you don't want billions of marbles of gold in your backyard. And so nothing has intrinsic value. People say, well, we have to have a $15 an hour minimum wage because that's a living wage. Another silly idea. If you can make it $15 an hour, why not make it $1,000 an hour?
Yeah.
About $1 million an hour? Because any idiot knows the economy would collapse if we tried to do that.
Yeah.
What makes the economy work is individuals, companies, consumers, everybody trading value. Anything that interferes with that and tries to artificially set value messes up the economy. Now, another important thing about value is this, and this is my take on what would ultimately eliminate poverty. I think it's doable. Here's the problem. We think we train our kids, the schools train our kids. We all believe that we have to work for a living. No one should work for a living. It's a really bad idea because work is worthless. You can spend all day digging holes and filling them up again, and you will have done nothing. Why? You've done a huge amount of work, but you've created no value. What we need to teach people to do is create value for others. That's what you and I are doing right now. We're trying to create value for your listeners.
Yes.
I'm not thinking about making money here. Yeah, I may sell a few more books if some of your listeners go out and buy my book.
Yeah.
You may get a few more listeners to your podcast.
Yeah.
That's not the focus of why we're here. We're here trying to create value for others. And if everyone's focus was how to best create value for others, we wouldn't have any poor people. Now, we might have people that had more money than others or less money than others. Like, I'm a musician. I have friends that are musicians. Many of my friends don't do all that well financially because they're musicians.
Right.
And musicians often don't get paid all that much. But all of my friends that are musicians know what they signed up for. They're saying, I'm going to make my music and I'm going to be happy doing it. And if I don't make quite as much money as the next guy, fine. And so that's what I mean by eliminating poverty. I don't consider those friends of mine that are musicians to be poor. They're rich.
Yeah.
They're getting what they want out of life. And how they do financially is completely unimportant. And so what we want to do, I think, is create a world where everyone is trying to create value for others. I mean, try and imagine, to use John Lennon's term, what that would really be like. Imagine a world where everybody is trying to create value for the rest of the world. And that's how we all spend our days. it also changes everything in how you look at life. When I got up this morning, I didn't go, oh my darn it, I got to go do a podcast today, and I'm sick. I don't really feel good. No, I got up. Hey, I can hardly wait to go do that podcast.
Yeah.
I want to go. I want to go talk to Dale's listeners and help them see how the world could be better. And that's what life is like when you're trying to create value rather than just working for a living.
Mm-hmm.
Even somebody that's, let's say they're working at a fast food joint, okay, they shouldn't be trying to please the boss. They should be going, let me think about that end consumer. I'm making a burger for that guy. I'm going to make that guy the best burger he's ever had.
Yeah.
I'm going to do everything I can to make it perfect for him. And I'm going to serve it to him happily and pleasantly and try and make his day better. Now, I can tell you this, if that's the way he's approaching his job, his boss is going to be happy without him even thinking about his boss, because he's going to be pleasing the boss's customers. And I'll bet that it won't be long before he's running that fast food joint.
Yeah, I agree.
That's how people get ahead, is you've got to be creating value for the consumer. The consumer is the end product, not your boss, not anybody else, but the consumer. Just like right now between you and I, the only person that's our boss is your listeners. Right. They're the person we've got to please. And if we please them, they're going to come back. If we don't please them, they're going to go somewhere else and find somebody that does please them. So we want to create value for them. Now, when I say please them, I don't mean that we want to pander to them. No. I'm not going to say things I don't believe just to get more listeners. I'm not going to say things in my book that I don't believe just to get more readers. But I am doing the best I can to create true value for them. And I think that's the way we want the world to work. Another problem with socialism is they want to create a world where people are equal. Well, that's just dumb. Should we be equal in the eyes of the law? Of course. In the eyes of society? Of course. But we're not equal. We all have different talents and abilities. And we have to learn how to best use our own talents and abilities and not try and be somebody else. In my book, one of the things I go through is I take a dozen or so, I don't remember, famous people. And I say, what would happen if they swapped roles? Would you want to buy a hit song written by Dwight Eisenhower? I don't think so. Would you want to see Maya Angelou run D-Day? No, I'm guessing not. We all have our niche, and that's what we should be doing, is looking for our niche in life where we can best provide value for others. Now, that necessarily means that we're not going to be equal. No. Some people are going to make more money than others. Some people are going to make less. But if we're exploiting our own niche, pushing ourselves to create value for others, we're going to be happy with however much money we make. And that's the kind of a world I want to live in. And I hope that's the kind of world your listeners want to live in, where everybody is first of all focused on others.
Yeah, I get you on that. I think I agree. That's what I'm doing. I don't make a lot of money on in fact, here's my podcast. It's costing me money. However, I enjoy it. I love it. And I'm getting, my podcast is not just economics. I have everybody, I do anything they want, anything a company wants to do except sports. I won't do a sports show unless it's really extraordinary. But I do a lot of shows like this for people to listen to if they would choose and get something out of it. I just got a letter from a lady on one of my podcasts who just was absolutely thrilled with it, wanted to be on my show. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's my voice. That's what I'm doing. That's why I'm doing it. Kind of like you're saying. My next question, though, is kind of it's what are the ABCs of economics, and why should I care?
Okay. The ABCs of economics are that action creates behaviors that come from choices. Action leads to behaviors, leads to comes from choices.
Yes.
Because all of the actions we take are based on our choices. And those activities or actions, after we've done them for a while, become behaviors. So that the things that we do evolve from our own choices. Socialism tries to take those choices away, which means it interferes with action and behavior. And so that's part of why you can't possibly have a free country that's socialist. Every action we take comes from self-interest. Now that sounds like a bad thing to say to some people at first, but self-interest is not the same thing as selfishness.
Bingo.
Yes, selfishness is a bad thing.
Yes.
Self-interest is necessary to survival. If I'm not self-interested enough to eat dinner, if I keep that up very long, I'm going to starve. Self-interest is critical to survival. And every living organism knows that. Huh? Yes. Now, I don't think they think about it, but if you put a bale of hay 100 meters from a cow and another bale of hay 500 meters from the cow is going to go to the closer one.
Yeah.
Because at some level, it's built into the cow to, at some level, understand, if you want to use that word, that in order to get to the hay, he has to burn calories. And if he doesn't make up for the calories he burns, when he gets to the hay by eating the hay, he's going to die.
Yeah.
If you put a plant in a room with a window, the plant will always grow to the light because that's where it gets its energy. So even animals and plants behave in self-interest. And I'll go even further than that. We talked a few minutes ago about chaotic systems. One example, one of the ways a free market works is through a particular kind of chaotic system called spontaneous order. Spontaneous order is a hardly understood term by most people. You've probably seen pictures of birds that can turn on a dime, a whole flock, boom, without a leader. Mm-hmm. How does that happen? Spontaneous order. The economy is an example of spontaneous order. Spontaneous order works when we all do our own thing, but it all works out. Now, a really good example of that is our bodies. Your liver cell, pick some cell in your liver, it doesn't know you exist. It's doing its own thing to survive. It has its own little job to do inside your body. It's not within the control of your brain. None of the cells in your body can be controlled by your brain. How do I know that? Well, first of all, half the cells in your body aren't even human. Like right now, I've got a cold. Why? Because there's viruses in my body that are doing stuff that are beyond my control.
Right.
Everybody has more than half the cells in your body are viruses, bacteria, fungi, other things that clearly are not in control of your brain. But none of your cells are either. In fact, if the cells were under control of your body, of your brain, you would die. Because it would take trillions of years for you to send a command to every cell in your body. Because there's so many of them.
Right.
Even at a dramatically rapid speed, it would take a ridiculously long time to send a signal to every cell in your body. Now, sometimes that spontaneous order gets out of control in the human, like a cold, or worse yet, cancer. Cancer is a good example of the difference between self-interest and selfishness. That liver cell I talked in your body is working out of self-interest. It's just doing what it's trying to do to be a good liver cell. And it's helping you in the process. It doesn't know it's helping you, but it's helping you. Cancer is when cells get selfish. They start operating not for the good of the body, but for their own good and start glomming onto resources and taking what they shouldn't be taking. That's when government, our brain, has to intervene and say, no, that's bad behavior. We have to put a stop to that. So we go see our doctor and we get treatment. That's the proper role of government. I'm not saying we should not have government. We should have government. But government should be controlling bad actors, not trying to control the economy. Because trying to control the economy isn't going to work.
No.
It's impossible. And almost every time, excuse me a minute, possibly every time the government intervenes, they goof it up. They make it worse. Because everything has unintended consequences, and nobody is smart enough to work around that. It just isn't possible. And so they try, they may be even trying to do it right, but they can't. So what we would like to see, I think, is a world where we let spontaneous order work. Now, the problem with that is it's messy. That's what scares people, because they say, well, nobody's in charge. How can this work? There's been a lot of study done on herds of animals. They operate out of spontaneous order, and it's fascinating. What happens is a herd of animals is clumped together, sort of, and they're going along across a large plain. Now, let's say they sense some sort of threat from the south. What happens? Well, within the herd, the animals start moving toward the north. So a circulation gets set up where people go, the animals, they're not people, the animals go from the south to the north in a constantly circulating pattern. Now, you might say, well, what about the poor people that are getting pushed to the back? Doesn't that increase their risk of predation, getting eaten by a predator? And yes, it does. But the overall average drops. That is, everybody in the long run is safer, even though some individuals temporarily are at greater risk. And that's the way an economy works, is that yes, as the economy changes, some will benefit, some will be put in a less beneficial position. But in the long run, everyone is better off. And so we have to learn to accept the fact that it's messy, and that we're going to let it be messy because messy works better. That's how a flock of birds can turn on a dime without a leader, is that as individuals, we can react far more quickly than government. If a bad product comes out, it'll fail very quickly because the consumers will decide, bad product, we aren't going to do it. It'll have a 1-star rating on Amazon, and people will stop buying it.
Yeah.
That's how spontaneous order works. We don't need government to tell us this is a bad product. We'll find out and we'll fix it. Now, yes, the first few people might get burned, but they aren't going to do that over and over and over again. So the losses will be minimal, but the overall average will be better.
I think I get it. I had never thought of things in that way of that. It just never entered my mind to think that north, south, like you were saying. I knew it because I'm from the mountains and I've seen these animals do that. But I never made the connection like you just did. I think that's marvelous. Absolutely incredible stuff you're talking about here, Doug. What is evidentiary economics?
Well, we talked about John Lennon and Imagine.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, too many economists are in economics to advance a point of view. They have their beliefs about what economics should be, what the economy should be like. And so they advocate policies based on what their beliefs are. I've made a career out of not letting my beliefs interfere with the evidence. I go wherever the evidence leads me. And if I were to discover evidence that socialism could work, I would be the first one to say so. But everything I've discovered says it can't work. And So everything I advocate about economics is based on research. It's based on evidence. It's based on truth, not based on what I think ought to happen. Probably the first time that conflict existed, at least the first time it was popularized, maybe, was Plato in
Whenever.
way back then. And Plato thought that the best way to run the world, the economy, was to have philosopher kings that made all the decisions, these really smart people that were benevolent and nice. And but it didn't take long for his prized student, Aristotle, the founder of logic, to say, no, you're wrong, Plato, that won't work. It logically fails. Why? Well, do you remember that web of values we talked about? That list of values, or web, however you want to see it. The problem is, no matter how smart or benevolent I am, I can't know what's number one on your list. I can't know what's number two on your list. I don't know anything about your list. In fact, if you were to go on the internet and do a search on the 10 most valuable things, the things that are most important to life, I guarantee you'll get a list. You'll find 50 or 60 or 100 of them. Mm-hmm. And they won't all be in the same order or even close. Why not? Because we all have different values. And in order for me to plan an economy, I would have to know everybody's values and how they all added up and where they were all going. I can't do that. No. Nobody can do that.
No.
And so we have to have spontaneous order, because that's the only way we can vote with our values. And that's really what it comes down to. In economics, you vote every day by buying what you value, by rewarding what you value in one way or another. And if we can't do that, we aren't free.
No. Totally agree with you. I got a question here that actually you wrote the question, and I'm curious about it. What is the ideal tax policy?
Okay. Well, let's start with the tax policy we have now. In my book, I do a little exercise where I imagine 100 people going on a hike. And you show up at the trailhead, and you're told that for this hike, the majority have voted that they're going to divide up the packs. Every person was supposed to bring a 10-pound pack. And but they decided they're going to break those packs up, and the strongest people will have to carry the most weight, and the weakest people will have to carry the least. And so they have devised a physical fitness test that they're going to use as the way they do that. So they give this test, and it turns out that the fittest person has to carry 420 pounds. And the next 4 or 5 fittest people have to carry a little over 100 pounds. And the least fit 50 have to carry nothing. Now, does that sound fair?
Not at all.
It sounds crazy. I mean, 420 pounds?
No way.
But that's an exact analogy to the U.S. tax system.
Mm-hmm.
The people that make the most pay 42%.
Mm-hmm.
That's your 420 pounds.
Yeah.
And the bottom pay next to nothing. Now, in what reality does that make sense? It doesn't. And worse yet, any tax is a tax on the thing, is a punishment for the thing you're taxing. So on income tax, you're punishing people for producing. Do we want to punish production?
Obviously, we do.
We do, but it's a bad idea.
Yeah, it is.
What would work better? Well, a flat tax would. Why a flat tax? Well, a flat tax taxes consumption, not production. It doesn't say, I'm going to punish you if you produce more. It says, if you spend more, you'll get taxed more. So The other thing is it eliminates a whole lot of the problems that income tax has. I don't know about you. I don't do my own taxes. I have an accountant do that because I don't know all the ins and outs. I can't. I'm an economist and I can't figure it out. So I've got to pay somebody else to do it. So we pay accountants, we pay lawyers, we pay lots and lots of people to do taxes for us. All that money could be saved if we had a flat tax. The other thing is we already have the mechanism in place. It's called a sales tax. All you have to do is put in a national sales tax, say at 15%, and you're done. No accountants, no lawyers, nobody trying to fiddle the books. You're done with it. And everybody pays their fair share.
Yes, they do. If a rich guy goes out and buys a $10,000 automobile and I go buy a $500 automobile, we're going to pay exactly the same. 15.
Exactly right. You both pay your 15% or whatever we decide on.
Yeah.
And it all works out fair. And the rich guy is still paying more than you are in dollars.
Right.
So it works out fine. The other thing people talk about is taxing corporations. There's a dirty little secret about that they don't want you to know. You can't tax a corporation. It's impossible. Why? Corporations are fiduciary agents. They have a responsibility to their stockholders. They are not allowed to do anything that will harm the stockholder. So here's what has to happen. If the government adds a 20% tax to a corporation, the corporation can't take that money away from the stockholders. It has one choice and one choice only: raise prices by 20%.
Exactly.
So it becomes basically a flat tax.
Yeah.
But with a big disadvantage. It puts American corporations who have to pay that tax at a disadvantage compared to foreign corporations that don't have to pay that tax.
Right.
So all it does is put Americans out of work, lower American wages, and does not do what people think it's going to do, and that is make the corporation make less profit. That's impossible.
Yeah. Well, we can thank Woodrow Wilson for the income tax.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what he said is still being said today. It's only going to affect the rich.
Yep, and only at 3%.
Yeah. Yeah, right. What factors affect economic predictions? Well, you already told me that one.
Mm-hmm.
Butterfly in Brazil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's impossible. Again, the problem is that prediction is notoriously unreliable, if not completely impossible. I guess another thing, though, that I would want to take a little bit of time to talk about is the problems with going back to the equality issue, that a lot of people want to see equality and they think that they have ways to do that. Um, I, when I was young, well, I guess I still am an athlete. I run and I lift weights and so on. But when I was younger, I participated in a lot of sports. I was an athlete, played football and baseball and all that. And I was maybe in the first generation that, among other things, got participation trophies. But I also got trophies for performance. Now, I don't really have a problem with participation trophies per se, because showing up is a huge part about success. If you don't show up, you can't win.
Right.
So, yeah, should we reward people for showing up? Sure. But we should also reward them for performance. I think it's fine, like in schools. Sure, give a kid an award for perfect attendance, but also give them an award for straight A's. We try and make things equal by reducing the effect of meritocracy. And meritocracy matters. It matters a whole lot. And if you look at the areas where meritocracy rules, what you will see is an amazing lack of any kind of discrimination. You look at the U.S. Olympic team, you'll see people from every race, creed, color, persuasion.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Because merit matters. The best get on the Olympic team. You look at pro sports, you don't see any discrimination in pro sports. Why not? Because merit matters. And that's the way everything in life should be. We should all be choosing that niche where we can provide the most value for others and then excelling at it. And we shouldn't be governed by people trying to tell us that our success hurts others. In what reality does my having a PhD hurt somebody that doesn't have one?
Doesn't bother me.
That's just crazy. Okay, I chose to pursue where I think I can create value best by going as far as I can in that direction. And that's what everybody should be free to do. Like I said, it's unfortunate that our educational system doesn't teach that. Instead of just trying to crank out people like an assembly line in an education system, we should be trying to, and by the way, I spent 30 years as an educator, so I feel somewhat qualified to speak about this. Instead of trying to crank out people by a one-size-fits-all kind of curriculum, we should be trying to help people find their niche, find out what they're best at. Now, what that means is one of the ways you find out what you're best at is by failing at some things. And that's just the way life is.
Yeah.
Okay. I did not do well in English grammar classes. I am the world's worst proofreader. And and the errors that were found by my proofreaders in my book are astonishing. They found lots of them. And most of them have been fixed by now, happily. But why? Because when I read something, I see what was intended. I don't even really see the words.
Yeah.
It's just my style. And so if I hadn't done poorly in English grammar classes, I might have thought I should become a proofreader. And that would have been a big mistake because I would have failed at that. Excuse me. Right. And so we have to do well at some things and badly at others in order to find out where we're best and where we should be pushing ourselves. And so we don't do kids a favor by passing them along in everything. But now we should be kind about it. I mean, if I were giving us this, I taught a lot of math, and if I were going to give a student a bad grade in math, I would say, you know what? Let's try some stuff, but this may not be your field. You might want to look into a different field than math as a place to pursue your dreams. Maybe you're built to be a musician, and I've had students like that. One immediately leaps to mind. It's a very successful musician that didn't do all that great at math, and so giving people bad grades in anything should be a matter of merit, and it's helping them. It's not hurting them. If you give somebody a D in math, you're telling them this may not be your thing. Now, I say may not because it may just be that you didn't connect with them well enough. Maybe they need a different math teacher.
Yeah. Einstein failed math.
Yes, Einstein didn't do, and as a matter of fact, I failed first year algebra.
So did I, 4 times.
But in my case, it was because I was fascinated by calculus. So I was sitting in the back, teaching myself calculus. I got 100 on every test, but the way the teacher graded was half homework and half test, and I didn't do any of the homework. So I had the highest test grade in the class, but I failed it. That's a case where I probably would have been better off with a different teacher.
Yeah.
Somebody would come to me and said, "What are you doing back there, Cardell?" "Oh, you're doing calculus." "Oh, well, maybe we need to move you to a different class and someplace where you can pursue that a little bit more."
Yeah.
And um,
It's interesting that the economy isn't what we think it is,
no, it's not.
what we believe it to be. It's one of our values is the economy. Like
Yes,
1980s when all that mess happened with the banks and stuff, that nobody believed it.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
The economy is all about our values, and the more we leave it free, the more the government doesn't mess it up, the better. Now, again, I'm not saying the government shouldn't police the bad actors. There's lots of stuff that shouldn't be allowed. Monopolies, for example. But the government shouldn't be tinkering with it. This idea of buying a 10% stake in Intel, bad idea. That's the government intervening in something that it has no business intervening in. Intel can rise and fall on its own merits. It doesn't
right?
need government help.
Right. If it's going to fail, it's going to fail. But it's kind of like government got involved with the automobile industry a long time ago, while back
Yes,
anyway. And look at the
that was
mess
a
it's
big
in now.
mistake.
Look at the mess it's
Yeah.
in now. You know, you're hitting the head nail right on top of the head here. What factors affect economic predictions besides a butterfly in Brazil?
Well, we've talked about one a little bit, and that's chaos.
Yeah.
Um, Chaotic systems are impossible to predict, but there's a couple of others. One of them is boom and bust cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Boom and bust cycles are caused when, and I hate to say this, but is there a way we could pause for a couple of minutes?
Yes. Just give me a
Could
second.
we do that? I'm going to have to. Uh, got the better.
Yeah, I can get to you. Uh, I was just sitting here thinking, which is unusual for me to think, that is it, and I just read this last note you got here, is economics about money? Is it more than that?
Hmm. Yeah, like we touched on earlier, every decision you've ever made is an economic decision. You're deciding to trade one thing for another. So if you come home after a day's work and say, well, gosh, what do I want to do? Do I want to go for a walk or do I want to watch TV? That's an economic decision. You're deciding how to spend your time. Everything you do spends something. Now, what makes capitalism special is partly how we decide to spend things. Um, I think I mentioned earlier, I run every day, I lift weights every day. Why do I do that? That's capitalist thinking. I'm investing for the future. I'm and you said earlier about when I'm as old as you are. I may be older than you. I'm 77,
2 years, got me by two. I'm
and
75.
and and I'm hoping to go a whole lot longer
Me too.
and healthy. I mean, I want to be able to continue to do the things I love to do. And so what do? I run every day. I lift weights every day. I'm
Mhm.
investing for the future. That's how a capitalist spends time, money, effort, everything. Capitalism is the economics of hope for the future. It's saying, I'm going to do today something that will make things better tomorrow. And that's the anti-capitalists don't like that idea. They're sort of in the eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die mode. But hey, that only works if you actually die tomorrow.
Yeah.
That doesn't work so well if you are going to be around. So what people don't understand, people blame the rich capitalists. Here's why that is. It's a little bit of a long story, but let me pursue it. From the year 0 to the year 1500, there was no economic progress. We can measure that by per capita GDP. That's per capita GDP measures how much people produce individually.
Right.
And from 0 to 1500, per capita GDP didn't move at all. That is, the amount of stuff being produced in the world was fixed. There was only this much stuff, and it didn't change. That meant that if you wanted more stuff, you had to take it from somebody else. In economics, we call that fixed pie thinking. It's as though there's a pie of a given size, and if you want a bigger piece of that pie, you got to get somebody else's. Unfortunately, we're locked into that mindset, but that time is long gone. Back then, Robin Hood made sense. It doesn't now. Why not? Well, from 1500 to 1700, things slowly began to change. We started to invent capitalism. And so per capita GDP slowly started to rise. 1700 came along and a new country was born. And that country was built on capitalism, the US. The first country in the world to enshrine patents in its constitution. That's huge, because if your inventions aren't protected by patents, you're not going to make those inventions.
No.
Da Vinci came up with all kinds of cool stuff, but it never happened. Why? No patents and no capitalist to invest in those inventions.
Right.
Now, since then, the whole world is 18 times better off. Every person in the world is 18 times better off than they were in 1700. In the US and Europe, it's more like 30 times better off. In 1950, 30% of the world was in extreme poverty. Now it's cut down to 9%. Capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty than any other system imagined. And so we blame the rich because we're still thinking about fixed pies, but the pies aren't fixed anymore. Now what happens is an entrepreneur, let's say Bill Gates, what he does is he makes the pie bigger. He creates something that helps all of us. We're talking on these computers and on the internet right now, thanks to Bill Gates.
Right.
Now, he made $1 billion doing it. So what? We're better off. So it's the opposite of Robin Hood. It's the rich getting rich by helping everybody else. Take Jeff Bezos. I actually ran the numbers on this. Because of Amazon, on average, we are $3,000 a year richer, every one of us.
Wow.
How did that happen?
Because
we don't have to go to stores. This stuff gets delivered to our door.
Yeah.
We get better prices. Everything, we get $3,000 in free money thanks to Bezos. Now, did he get rich because of it? Of course he did. So what? I'm going to turn down the $3,000 to keep him poor?
No.
What kind of sense does that make? And that's the problem, is that we're still thinking about the pie the way it was in 1500.
Yeah.
We're thinking of a world in scarcity, but we live in a world of wild abundance. We have at our disposal tons and tons of things that just the average person in this country right now, last number I saw was 93% have a cell phone. A cell phone that will do more than a mainframe computer would do in 1980.
That's right. has more computing power than the Apollo landing craft.
Yes, absolutely. And so, and yeah, it's incredible. We have things at our disposal that we don't appreciate. We think the people, the 7% that don't have a cell phone think that it's horrible that they don't have one. And in some sense that might be true, but look at the fact that 93% do. That's absolutely amazing
It
that we
is.
have that kind of power in our hands. We have this internet where we can find out astonishing amounts of information virtually immediately. And when I was a kid, when you were a kid, it was like a 2-mile schlep to the library to find out anything. Now it's a 10-second keystroke on my computer.
Yeah. Except my library was only 2 blocks away. My town was very small. But I get your point. I understand what you're saying. Because when I moved to California with my dad, when they separated, it was a 2-mile walk from our house to the library. And I made that walk.
Yeah. And so and everything has been improved dramatically. I mean, I hear young people today complaining about the cost of housing. And yes, houses cost more now. But when I was a kid, the house I grew up in, I actually looked it up on the internet, it's still there, it was built in 1885 and was 961 square feet. Now, by today's standards, that's a tiny house. But when I was a kid, that was normal.
Yeah.
That was about the size. Nowadays, the standard is 2,300 square feet, more than twice as big.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the house costs more because it's a lot bigger. Now, what I would say to those young people that are having trouble with housing, and by the way, that house I lived in, no central air conditioning. In fact, not even window air conditioning.
Yeah.
And this was in Chicago summers.
Oh, boy.
A radiator in every room.
Yeah.
No central heat. No dishwasher. No washing. No, we had a crude sort of a washing machine with a
Mhm.
little wheel on the top.
Yeah.
No clothes dryer. No microwave. Now all of those things are standard in housing.
Right.
So if I were a young person today, what I would do is I would go out and buy a manufactured home. You can get one with all those conveniences for about 100,000,
Yeah.
and you can go buy an acre of land for around 10,000. And so I'd get me a manufactured home, set it up on an acre of land, and I'd be fine.
Yep.
And for about the same in adjusted dollars as what my parents had to spend for the home I grew up in.
Yeah.
But the problem is that people see what the old timers have, the boomers have, and say, well,
Yeah.
I want that. Yeah, but we spent a lifetime building that.
Mhm.
And that's what they don't see is that we didn't start out like that. I also went back and looked up the first house I bought. The first house I bought cost $1,500 and it was 600 square feet.
About the size of my apartment.
Exactly. We're talking about very small. The second house I bought was $15,000, but it was only about 1,000 square feet. And so it isn't, and which is, by the way, about the size of a manufactured home today.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about asking people to sacrifice, but people, and the other thing is where people choose to live. Yeah, if you're going to try and move to downtown New York, you can't expect you're going to do that for any small amount of money.
No.
But there are lots and lots of places in the world where you can get easily get land for $1,000 an acre.
Yeah.
And you can get it for a lot less than that. So one has to adjust one's life to one's resources. But again, I think the thing we want to go back to is this idea of value.
Yeah.
And whatever you can afford or cannot afford, it will all be made better if you Find out what you're look for what you're good at. Look for where what you value is and where your talents lie, and pursue that.
Mhm.
Push, practice it, get good at it, and you won't have any financial problems.
Right. Well, we've run out of time.
Okay, then I'll
I'm
leave you
sorry to
with
say
this.
that. Is it? Well, let me turn the. Don't leave. I'm going to turn off the recording, but don't leave. Okay.
Okay, sure.